Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the UK, English language, released in the year 2018, directed by Gareth Evans, and this film is called Apostle. So Apostle is set in the early 1900s in the UK. You've got this secluded island that is inhabited by a cult. Now this cult is led by religious fanatics. They say that if you steer off the word of God, you're going to be punished severely. And so the people living there are living under fear, but they believe that this is the right thing to do and that they've basically separated themselves from the corruption of the outside world. And so this family in the outside world, they have this daughter, and they believe the daughter is amongst this cult, and the cult say yes, she is, and if you want her back, you're going to have to pay a ransom. And so the family don't believe that she's going to be returned safely if they pay, and so they believe that paying them is a death sentence. So they enlist the services of the brother. Now the brother has had a traumatic past that has really shook him up big time, so he's obviously got a lot of problems, but he's been enlisted with the task of infiltrating this secretive cult, gaining their trust, making it seem like he's one of them, but at the same time pinpointing where his sister is and saving her. So what starts off as a rescue mission quickly descends into a nightmarish fight for survival, and whether or not he can not only save his sister but himself is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Apostle. This was a really highly anticipated movie as far as I'm concerned. Ever since it came on Netflix, everybody has been talking about it because of the fact that Gareth Evans was directing it. Now Gareth Evans, if you're not familiar with his name, he created two of the best action films ever made in my opinion, The Raid and The Raid 2. And these are Indonesian films that really put Indonesia on the map, and not only Indonesia but also Gareth Evans. And the reason why those action films are so good, not only are the action choreography a character of their own, some of the most beautiful fight scenes and most intense fight scenes you'll ever see, but also the characters mixed in with the story created an experience where you never felt bored. You're always on the edge of your seat and you're always chewing your fingernails. And so I think, Gareth Evans, he just created two masterful films, and after that comes expectation. Now whether he likes it or not, he has a standard that he really has to deliver to, so his future films are always going to have that hallmark of The Raid, and this can be a curse as I said, but I actually think it's a good thing because it forces a director to really stay on their toes, keep on their toes, and basically not rest and basically take it for granted that their fan base is going to follow them everywhere. Is that obviously you are going to be judged by your previous films. And so coming into Apostle, the reason why I was really excited, not only pushing aside the fact that Gareth Evans was the director, it was also a horror film. And so you've got a brilliant action director, but what is he going to be like in a different genre? And I like when really good directors do this, is that it's very easy to steer clear of difference and do things that you've done before that have been successful and just basically recycling it, flogging a cash cow. But Gareth Evans has actually delved into the horror genre, which is something I really appreciate. And so I saw the trailer and I thought, this looks fantastic. This is a movie that I was expecting to love. And at the end of the day, I will say that I didn't love the film, but I actually thought that there was some glimpses of absolute masterstroke from Gareth Evans. And the biggest masterstroke that this film has was the absolutely phenomenal tension in the atmosphere. As far as horror films are concerned, you don't get much more horror than Apostle. Is that it maintains that level of dread, it maintains that level of suspense, and just the nerve-shredding tension that is magnified through not only the visuals and the performance from Dan Stevens as this main character, but also the soundtrack. The soundtrack just combines with everything to make something that is just a suffocating bubble. And this suffocating bubble is getting darker and darker, and the things inside the bubble are things that you don't want to be associated with, but you feel as though you've got no room to move. And so it is a claustrophobic feel. This island feels like a completely different world, and it's inhabited by people that are going to do horrible things to this main character if he's found out. And so there's constant situations where he could be found out, and he's on the verge of being caught. And this is something that I absolutely loved, is that, alright, I'm on the edge of my seat, I'm not noticing how much time is going by because I'm always glued to the screen and getting into the situation that Gareth Evans has created. And so Dan Stevens does a great job at this main character. He's a very, very damaged character. So although he's a traditional good guy, he's trying to do the right thing. I always felt he was a pressure cooker. He was the ticking time bomb, because there were moments where I thought he's going crazy. And you see there's some sequences where you see his back and there's scars all over it, and you're constantly asking, what the hell happened to this guy? And so is he going to flip out? Is he going to actually blow his cover? And what's he going to do if that cover is blown? And so I always thought this main character, yes, he is traditionally a good guy, but there's a lot of three-dimension to him. And so, alright, well, not only is it interesting on whether or not he's going to catch, basically rescue his sister, but it's also interesting as him as a person. And I think this is what Gareth Evans understands very well, is that it's giving people a lot more of a dimension as opposed to something that is a cardboard cutout and all about the situation. Is that you can relate to someone, it makes the situation even scarier. And so this movie goes for about 2 hours, and I thought the runtime was fairly decent, in that I was always invested into what was going on. And so the movie does go down very, very dark places. Some of the violence is really, really cringeworthy. And I mean cringeworthy in all the best ways. Is that I thought, oh God, just really, really painful. And the way that Dan Stevens, he reacted to certain things, I could feel the pain that he was going through. And so it's definitely a movie that you experience. It's a movie that you really endure because it's such a painful experience. And so if you don't like depraved sort of violence, then maybe this movie is not for you. But what I liked about that depraved sort of violence was that it wasn't overdone to a point where it was gratuitous. And if it's gratuitous, you get an opportunity to desensitize yourself to it. And so when he's not enabling you to desensitize yourself to it, he's not enabling you to disconnect from the situation. And that's what creates that tension and that bubble that suffocates you. And so I thought atmospherically this film was absolutely brilliant, and there were some brilliant horror set pieces and some really weird moments as well towards the end that I thought just contributed to that horrifying factor. And then on the other hand, you've got the power of corruption, basically these fanatical religious leaders upon these vulnerable villages, and how dangerous that can be in moulding a vulnerable person into a very dangerous person. And also blind faith, basically relying on religion totally and not, basically thinking other ways, and how destructive that can be. So yes, it is another sort of religious as bad kind of film, but I believe it's important because yes, religious can be very comforting, but also it can be very ugly because you got powerful people hiding behind the word of God in order to get what they want. So I always thought that the corruption was there and they were manipulating everything that was happening. So I thought the villains in the film were very good. Unfortunately, what prevents this movie from being a masterpiece like the Raid films is that the characters, apart from Dan Stevens' character, they just weren't that interesting. Yes, the villains were fairly decent because of the fact they were evil, but I thought especially Dan Stevens' character and the sister, I never really felt that chemistry between them, and I never felt as though if the sister was killed or the brother was killed, they weren't going to miss each other very much. Is that I thought it was a little bit cold, and the exchanges with the other characters I thought were cold to some extent, and I wanted a little bit more from the supporting cast. And I also thought the story wasn't as captivating as The Raid. Is that yes, this is another religious, religious as bad kind of film, and I thought yes, it's done very well, but it wasn't as intriguing as I wanted it as with his previous works. And so I will say that yes, the story, the atmosphere really captures you, but the story doesn't capture you so much. It's all about the situation and whether or not he's going to get to his sister. But if you look at it from a creative standpoint, I don't think it's quite as fantastic as the Raid films were. And so I thought that was a little bit of a criticism. But putting that aside, it's a horror film that I would recommend based on the fact that atmospherically it's brilliant. So if that's your kind of thing, go out there and see it. I'm going to give Apostle 4 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you there.